The FAA says you cannot fly your drone over 400 feet, but you have a job to inspect an 889-foot tower, and you might think this mission is illegal because of that 400-foot altitude limit. This is one of the most common questions from new remote pilots, and the answer involves a deep understanding of the regulations, because the 400-foot limit is actually a lot more flexible than it sounds. You are not strictly capped at 400 feet above the ground everywhere you go. The FAA regulation actually states that you are allowed to fly up to 400 feet above the structure you are inspecting as long as you remain within 400 feet horizontally of that structure. This rule is designed specifically for missions like tower inspections or bridge work, where you need to get close to the top of an obstacle to perform an assessment. However, you must be extremely careful because while this rule allows you to operate higher than 400 feet above the ground, it does not give you permission to ignore the airspace you are flying in. You need to check your sectional chart before every single flight to identify the class of airspace around your tower. If you are standing in a faded magenta circle on your chart, you are likely in Class Echo airspace that starts at 700 feet above ground level. If that tower is 889 feet tall, you have already entered controlled airspace before you even reach the top of the structure. This is the part where most pilots get into trouble because they are so focused on the structure height that they forget about the floor of the controlled airspace above them. You must perform the math to calculate your altitude relative to the floor of the airspace. If you are in controlled airspace, you must have LAANC authorization or a broader waiver before you ever turn on your drone. Even if you have the proper authorization to be in that airspace, you have another challenge to consider, which is the invisible hazard of guy wires. The FAA suggests that you stay 2,000 feet away from these wires because they are extremely difficult to see from the air, and they represent a massive safety risk to your drone. While this is technically a recommendation and not a hard regulation, you have to understand that if you crash your drone into a guy wire, you will be held liable for any damage to the tower or the communications equipment. The FAA may not fine you for hitting a guy wire, but the company that owns the tower will certainly hold you responsible for the repair costs. This is why the best drone pilots do not fly these missions alone. You should always have a visual observer on the ground with a radio or some form of instant communication to help you spot these wires from a different angle. A visual observer can see the tower from a perspective that you cannot see on your camera screen, and they can warn you if you are drifting too close to a hazard. You must be the most prepared pilot on the job site by combining your knowledge of sectional charts with real-world safety protocols. Never let the excitement of a high-paying job or a complex inspection mission make you skip the pre-flight check of the airspace floor or the safety briefing with your visual observer. Being a professional remote pilot is about more than just flying the drone. It is about demonstrating that you know how to navigate the complex layers of the national airspace system. Let us expand on this because understanding the environment is the difference between an amateur and a professional. When you are looking at that sectional chart, you are looking for more than just the airspace class. You are looking for the total picture of the environment. You need to look for nearby airports that might have traffic patterns that bring aircraft into your working area. You need to look for temporary flight restrictions or notice to air missions that might have been issued for that specific day. When you are conducting a tower inspection, you are effectively becoming part of the aviation ecosystem, and that means your responsibility to communicate and observe increases significantly. Think about the equipment you are carrying. Are you using a drone with an omnidirectional obstacle avoidance system? If so, that is a great safety feature, but do not rely on it exclusively. Sensors can fail, and they often cannot detect thin wires like guy wires until it is far too late. Your own eyes and the eyes of your visual observer are your primary safety systems. This is why we preach mission planning so heavily. You should be visiting the site beforehand if possible to walk the perimeter. Identify where your takeoff and landing zone will be. Identify where your visual observer will stand to get the best angle on the guy wires. These are the steps that separate the pros from the hobbyists who just show up and start flying. And remember that commercial insurance often has its own set of requirements. Many insurance policies for drone operators will require you to follow those FAA recommendations like staying away from guy wires. If you violate those recommendations, you could find yourself without coverage if an accident occurs. That is a risk that simply is not worth taking for any amount of money. Always read your policy and always make sure you are operating within the safety guidelines that your insurance provider expects. If you are just starting your career as a commercial pilot, you might feel pressured to take any job that comes your way. But the hallmark of a successful pilot is knowing when to say no. If the airspace is too complex for your current experience level, or if the safety requirements are not being met by the client, do not be afraid to walk away. Your reputation is your most valuable asset in this industry, and one incident caused by poor planning or recklessness can end your career before it even begins. So why do we focus so much on these detailed rules? Because the drone industry is under a microscope. Every time a drone interferes with manned aircraft or causes a safety incident, the FAA faces more pressure to tighten the regulations. By being the pilot who understands the rules and who plans every mission with absolute precision, you are actually helping to protect the industry for everyone. We want to see more pilots succeeding in this field, and that means we need more pilots who are willing to do the hard work of learning these regulations inside and out. Now let us go even deeper into the actual site briefing process. A professional safety briefing with your visual observer is not just a 5-second conversation. It involves walking through the flight plan step by step. You need to identify the exact spot where the pilot will be standing and where the observer will be stationed. You need to discuss radio channels and emergency procedures. What happens if the drone loses connection? What happens if an emergency vehicle suddenly arrives at the base of the tower? These are the scenarios that separate a high-end commercial pilot from a hobbyist. You must have a predetermined emergency plan for every single flight. If your visual observer does not know exactly what their role is during a communications failure, then you are not ready to fly. It takes discipline and it takes practice, but this is the standard required for the industrial inspection world. Additionally, let us discuss the importance of logging your flight data. When you are working on a high-value asset like a communications tower, you are not just capturing images or video. You are creating a record of your flight operation. Professional operators maintain detailed flight logs that include battery health, flight conditions, airspace authorization numbers, and the specific names of all personnel involved in the mission. If an issue ever arises with the client or with the FAA, these logs are your primary evidence that you conducted your operation safely and legally. Never skip the logging process. Treat every flight like it is a formal report. This attention to detail builds your credibility with clients and makes you a much more attractive hire for complex industrial projects. The industry is moving toward higher standards of accountability, and by being the pilot who logs everything properly, you are positioning yourself for long-term success. If you want to dive deeper into the real-world side of drone operations and learn how to handle these complex missions, check out the resources linked in the description below. We are committed to helping you build a safe and legal career in the drone industry, so make sure to subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the regulations that matter. We break down the hardest parts of the Part 107 exam and the real-world challenges you will face as a commercial pilot every single week, so you never have to guess whether you are flying legally. Thank you for joining us for this breakdown, and we will see you in the next video where we continue to master the rules of the sky. This is the standard you should hold yourself to for every single mission. Whether it is a small residential roof inspection or a massive industrial tower inspection, the same principles apply. Prepare the mission, check the airspace, understand the hazards, and communicate clearly with your team. If you do these things, you will not only be a legal pilot, you will be a safe pilot and a profitable pilot. The sky is waiting for you, but only if you are ready to put in the work to understand it properly. Keep practicing, keep studying, and keep flying safely. There are always new things to learn in aviation, and the best pilots are the ones who never stop asking questions and never stop trying to improve their craft. We are here to support you on that journey every step of the way. If you have questions about specific missions you have faced in the field, or if there are topics you want to see us cover in future videos, leave a comment below. We listen to every single one, and we use that feedback to build the content that you actually need. Thank you for your support, and we will see you in the next one.